The zero balance on my screen wasn't a glitch. It was a robbery committed by the woman currently humming in the kitchen, casually deciding my future was the price of her boyfriend's affection. The heat in Mesa, Arizona, doesn't just make you sweat. It pushes down on you, a physical weight that feels like it's trying to flatten you against the pavement. I was walking home from a 6-hour shift at Target, the red polyester of my shirt sticking to my back, my feet throbbing in non-slip shoes that had seen better days. But I didn't mind the heat. I didn't mind the ache in my arches. I had a ritual that made every blister worth it. I pulled my phone out of my back pocket. The screen was cracked in a spiderweb pattern near the home button, a casualty of dropping it on the bathroom tile 3 months ago. I hadn't replaced it because replacing it cost money, and money was for the exit strategy. That's what I called it in my head. I opened the banking app, waiting for the little spinning circle to load. This was my dopamine hit, my safety blanket. I had been saving since I was 9 years old. It started with birthday checks from my dad's side of the family, $20 here, $50 there. Then it became babysitting money from the neighbors who trusted me with their toddlers because I was so mature for my age. Now, it was tips from tutoring struggling middle schoolers in algebra and my bi-weekly paycheck from Target. I knew the number by heart. It should have been $4,280.15. The circle stopped spinning. The page loaded. Available balance, $0. I stopped walking. I stopped breathing. The desert sun was still beating down on me, but my blood turned to ice water. I blinked, sure that the glare on the cracked screen was playing tricks on me. I refreshed the page. The little circle spun again, mocking me. Available balance, $0. A noise escaped my throat, something between a gasp and a dry heave. I tapped on the transaction history, my fingers trembling, so hard I hit the wrong button twice. Finally, it loaded. A single transfer. Yesterday. Transfer to main checking. The entire amount. Every hour of shelving items. Every Saturday night spent watching other people's kids. Every birthday check I hadn't spent on clothes or movies. Gone. I didn't run the rest of the way home. I walked. I walked with a strange, robotic stiffness, my mind completely blank except for a single, screaming question mark. When I opened the front door, the blast of air conditioning usually felt like a blessing. Today it felt sterile. The house smelled like garlic and oregano. My mom, Brenda, was at the stove, stirring a pot of marinara sauce. She was wearing a new blouse, something flowery and bright that I hadn't seen before. "Hey, honey," she called out, not looking away from the stove. "Dinner's almost ready. Ray's coming over." Ray. Her boyfriend of 4 months. The guy who drove a lifted truck he couldn't afford and called me kiddo in a way that made my skin crawl. I stood in the entryway, still wearing my backpack. The Target name badge, Cassie, dug into my chest. "Mom," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. She tapped the wooden spoon against the side of the pot. I walked into the kitchen. I held up the phone with the cracked screen. "Where is it?" She turned then, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked at the phone, then at my face. She didn't look confused. She didn't look guilty. She looked calm, like she was explaining why we were out of milk. "Oh," she said. "I was going to tell you over dinner." "Tell me what?" I whispered. "I had to make a decision for the family, Cassie." I stared at her. "The family? It's just us. It's been just us since Dad left." "And Ray," she added, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "Ray is part of our lives now. We needed some things. There were bills, and look, the living room needed a refresh. We can't have guests over with that old sofa." My eyes darted to the living room. I hadn't even noticed walking in. There was a massive flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. It was too big for the space, practically touching the doorframe. Below it sat a new leather sectional that still smelled like chemicals. "You bought a TV," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "You bought a TV with my college money." "It wasn't just the TV," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "We're going to Scottsdale this weekend. Ray and I need a getaway. We've been so stressed." "That was my money," I said. I wasn't yelling. I couldn't yell. I felt like if I raised my voice, I would shatter. "I earned that. Tutoring. Target. That's my name on the account." "It's a custodial account, Cassie," she said, turning back to the stove. Legally, it's mine until you're 18. And honestly, you should be thanking me. Thanking you. If you hadn't had that money sitting there, she said, checking the pasta, you might have become entitled. Thinking you're better than everyone else just because you hoard cash. Family share, Cassie. That's what love is. Sacrifice. She said it so simply. Family share. As if stealing $4,000 from her 14-year-old daughter was a moral lesson she was graciously teaching me. I looked at her back. I looked at the new TV. I thought about the hours I stood on my feet. I thought about the algebra formulas I explained over and over to kids who didn't care. I realized something in that moment, standing in the kitchen while she hummed a tune. She didn't see me as a person. She saw me as a resource, an ATM with a heartbeat. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the pasta sauce on the floor. Okay, I said. She paused, glancing back over her shoulder, surprised by my surrender. Okay. I'm going to go change, I said. I walked to my room and closed the door. I sat on my bed, staring at the wall. The tears didn't come. Instead, a cold, hard stone formed in the pit of my stomach. It was heavy, and it was sharp. I reached into my backpack and pulled out a spiral-bound notebook I used for school. It was fresh and used. I grabbed a black Sharpie from my desk. On the cover, I didn't write math or history. I wrote evidence. I opened to the first page. My hand was steady now. Date, September 12th. Amount stolen, $4,280.15. Reason given, for the family. Items purchased, oversized flat-screen TV, leather sectional, trip to Scottsdale with Ray. I took a screenshot of the zero balance on my phone and emailed it to a new email address I created right then and there, one she didn't know about. Then I hid the notebook under my mattress, wedged between the box spring and the frame. She wanted me to learn about sacrifice. She wanted to teach me about the real world. Fine. I would learn. But she was going to learn something too. She just didn't know it yet. How many of you have had to grow up way too fast because the adults in your life failed you? It leaves a scar that nobody else can see. If you've ever felt this kind of betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Do it for the 14-year-old girl who just lost everything. And please, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I need to know I'm not alone in this. The house changed after that day. It wasn't just the furniture. The air itself felt heavier, thicker. 3 weeks later, Ray moved in. He didn't arrive with boxes or a moving van. He arrived with black garbage bags filled with clothes that smelled like stale smoke, and a drum said he insisted on setting up in the garage. My savings, my $4,280.15, evaporated faster than water on the Mesa pavement. The For the Family fund didn't go into an emergency account or home repairs. It dissolved into steak dinners I wasn't invited to, a lift kit for Ray's truck, and weekends where they disappeared and left me with an empty fridge. By November, the illusion of affluence cracked. The electricity was shut off for 6 hours on a Tuesday. Mom laughed it off as a clerical error, but I saw the pink disconnect notice in the trash. I fished it out, wiped off the coffee grounds, took a photo, and taped it into my notebook. Evidence. Then came the pivot. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich before my shift when Mom leaned against the counter. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "You're working a lot of hours, Cass," she said. "Ray and I were talking. Since you're practically an adult, it's time you learned about real expenses. We need you to contribute. Call it rent." I stopped spreading the peanut butter. "Rent," I repeated flatly. "I'm 14. Be independent," she countered, her voice hardening, parroting a line she'd probably rehearsed in the mirror. "Whatever you can spare." "Whatever you can spare" quickly morphed into a mandatory $200 every 2 weeks. I didn't argue. Arguing gave them information. Silence gave me cover. I became a magician. I cashed my checks at the bank, handing over the rent in cash so there was no paper trail for them to track. The rest, I got creative. I found the one place neither Mom nor Ray would ever look, a box of super absorbency tampons under the bathroom sink. I carefully unsealed the box, slid tightly folded $20 bills inside the cardboard applicators, and glued the box shut again. I applied for the dual enrollment program at Mesa Community College, not just for the credits, but for the alibi. I studied at the library. I picked up extra tutoring gigs. I came home only to sleep and pay my dues. 6 months after the theft, Mom sat me down. I thought she might apologize. I thought maybe Ray had messed up, and she was waking up. "I did you a favor, you know," she said, looking at her manicured nails. "Nails paid for with my money. If you hadn't had that money taken, you might have become entitled. You needed to learn the value of $1. That was the moment the last thread of attachment snapped. She wasn't just stealing. She was rewriting reality to make herself the hero. I went to my room and logged the conversation. Date: March 3rd. Claim: theft was a moral lesson. I felt safe in my secrecy. I thought I was smarter than them because I was quiet, but I underestimated how desperate people get when the money runs out again. I came home from school a week later to find my bedroom door ajar. I always closed it. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pushed it open. My drawers were pulled out. My mattress was askew. My clothes were in a pile on the floor. Mom was standing in the middle of the mess, holding a crumpled piece of paper I thought I had thrown away at school, a pay stub I'd missed. Her face wasn't calm this time. It was twisted into a look of pure, predatory betrayal. "You've been holding out on us," she whispered, shaking the paper at me. "We need to have a serious talk about what family really means." That serious talk resulted in my contribution rising to $300 every 2 weeks. I didn't fight it. I looked at the floor, mumbled an apology about forgetting the overtime pay, and handed over the cash. It was the tax I paid to keep the peace, to keep them from looking closer. They didn't find the tampon box. The next 2 years were a blur of exhaustion. I woke up at 5 a.m. for the dual enrollment classes at the community college, went to high school, went to work, and came home to a house that vibrated with tension. Ray had lost his job at the landscaping company and was now consulting, which mostly meant drinking beer on the couch and yelling at the news. I kept my head down. I scanned every pay stub at the library before bringing it home. I recorded audio of their arguments through the thin drywall. Evidence. 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 The second twist, the one that changed the trajectory of the war, arrived the summer before my senior year. It was a Tuesday in July. The heat was relentless, the kind that warps the air above the asphalt. I walked inside, expecting the usual sounds of the TV or Ray complaining about the heat index. Instead, silence. Mom was sitting at the dining room table. The surface was clear of the usual clutter of unpaid bills and takeout menus. In the center of the table sat a single piece of thick, cream-colored paper. An envelope lay ripped open next to it. My stomach dropped. Had they found the notebook? The tampon box? "Cassie," Mom said. Her voice was soft. Not the sharp, demanding tone she used for rent. Not the dismissive tone she used when I asked about groceries. It was sweet. "What's wrong?" I asked, staying near the door. She stood up and walked over to me. Before I could flinch, she wrapped her arms around me. It wasn't a motherly hug. It was tight, possessive, like a vine choking a tree. "Nothing is wrong, honey," she cooed into my hair. "Something wonderful has happened. For us." She pulled back, her hands gripping my shoulders, her eyes shining with a frantic kind of greed. She steered me toward the table. "Look," she pointed. I looked down at the letter. It was from a law office in Tempe. Estate of Gerald H. Miller. Beneficiary, Cassandra Miller. My grandfather. My dad's dad. He had passed away 6 months ago, but since Mom had cut off contact with that side of the family years ago, I hadn't known. "He left a trust," Mom said, her voice trembling with excitement. "A small trust. Just for you." I scanned the legalese. It wasn't millions, but it was significant. Enough to pay for 4 years of university. Enough to buy a car. Enough to leave this house and never look back. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I called them already," Mom said quickly. "Too quickly." "I told them I'm your guardian. Since you're still a minor for another few months, I can help manage the transfer. We can pay off the truck, fix the roof, maybe take a real vacation. Finally get ahead." She squeezed my hand. "Families share, remember? We're going to be okay, Cassie." I looked at the open envelope. It was addressed to me. Federal law said she shouldn't have opened it, but she didn't care about laws. She saw a lifeline. I looked up at her and forced a smile. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. "That's great, Mom." "It is," she beamed. "Now go wash up." We're ordering pizza to celebrate. I walked to my room, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. She thought she had won the lottery. She thought I was the same scared 14-year-old she had robbed 3 years ago. I closed my door and locked it. I pulled out my phone. I didn't text my friends. I didn't check social media. I dialed the number on the letterhead. Law offices. This is Sharon speaking. Hi, I said, my voice steady. My name is Cassandra Miller. I'm calling about a letter my mother just intercepted. I need to know exactly how to stop her from touching a single cent. Sharon didn't sound like a receptionist. She sounded like a gatekeeper. But as soon as I said the words intercepted and theft, her tone shifted from professional indifference to sharp alertness. She transferred me to an associate named Mr. Henderson. I'm 17, I told him, keeping my voice a whisper, my ear pressed against the receiver so hard it hurt. My birthday is in 3 months. My mother opened a letter addressed to me from your office. She intends to access the funds immediately. She did this before. Did what before? Mr. Henderson asked. His voice was deep, gravelly, and serious. She liquidated my custodial savings account when I was 14 for $1,000. She spent it on a TV and a vacation. I took a breath. I have the bank records. I have a confession recorded on my phone. I have a ledger of every dollar she's taken from me in rent since then. I need to know if she can touch this trust. There was a pause on the line. I could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard. The trust has a stipulation, he said finally. It matures upon your 18th birthday, but the trustee, your guardian, has discretionary access for educational or emergency maintenance prior to that. She's going to call it maintenance, I said. She's going to drain it. Not if we file an emergency petition for a guardian ad litem, Mr. Henderson said. If you have the evidence you claim you have, we can freeze the assets until you turn 18. But Cassie, this is going to be ugly. You're suing your mother. I know, I said. I'm not afraid of ugly. I'm afraid of being broke. Don't tell her you called, he instructed. Come to my office tomorrow after school. Bring everything. I hung up, deleted the call log, and took a deep breath. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had weaponized the system. I walked back out to the kitchen. The smell of pepperoni pizza filled the room, cheap, greasy comfort food that Mom usually claimed gave her heartburn. Tonight, she was 2 slices deep. Ray was there, too, leaning back in my chair, a beer in his hand. There she is, Ray boomed. The heiress. He winked. It made my skin crawl. Come sit, baby, Mom said, patting the chair next to her. She poured me a glass of soda. We were just talking about how to best use the money. Ray knows a guy who sells cars at auction. We could get you something cute. And maybe upgrade the truck for family trips. I sat down. I picked up a slice. I forced myself to chew. That sounds nice. It's a blessing, Mom sighed. Your grandfather finally doing something right. She reached for her purse, which was sitting on the floor. She pulled out a document. It wasn't the letter from the law firm. It was something she had printed off the internet. The text was dense, but the header was bold. Power of attorney, minor child assets. She slid it across the table, along with a pen. Since the lawyers are in Tempe and we're here, she said, her voice casual, I need you to sign this. It just gives me permission to handle the paperwork for you, so you don't have to miss school. You know how boring legal stuff is. Ray took a swig of beer, watching me over the rim of the bottle. Mom smiled, that tight, expectant smile that usually preceded a disaster. I looked at the paper. If I signed it, Mr. Henderson might not be able to stop her in time. If I refused, the war started tonight, before I had my soldiers in place. I picked up the pen. Mom's smile widened. Just right there at the bottom, she pointed. I lowered the pen to the paper, the tip hovering millimeters above the signature line, when Ray suddenly slammed his beer bottle onto the table. Wait, he said, his eyes narrowing as he looked at my hand. Why are you holding the pen like that? My fingers were white-knuckled around the cheap ballpoint. I hadn't realized how hard I was squeezing it until Ray pointed it out. You're gripping it like a dagger, kiddo. Ray laughed, the sound wet and gravelly. It's a signature, not a murder weapon. Relax. He reached over and patted my hand. His skin was rough, his palm damp. It took everything in me not to recoil. I forced my muscles to unlock, letting the pen rest naturally in the crook of my thumb. Just nervous, I murmured, staring at the paper. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of responsibility, Mom corrected, her eyes fixed on the signature line like a hawk spotting a field mouse. Which is why I'm taking it off your shoulders. Sign. I pressed the pen to the paper. Scritch. Scratch. I signed my name. It wasn't my best signature. It was shaky, rushed, but it was legible. Mom snatched the paper away the second I lifted the pen. She blew on the ink, then folded it neatly and tucked it into her purse. Good girl. I'll head to the bank first thing tomorrow morning after I drop you at school. By the time you get home, we'll have this all sorted. Sorted? I echoed. Sorted meant transferred. Sorted meant gone. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan cutting through the dark, listening to the muffled sounds of the TV in the living room. They were celebrating. I could hear the clink of bottles. They were spending money they didn't have yet, confident that the ATM, me, had just authorized a fresh withdrawal. At 6 a.m., my alarm went off. I dressed in my school uniform, but underneath my polo shirt, I wore a tank top. I packed my backpack, textbook, water bottle, and the most important item, the spiral-bound notebook labeled evidence. I also grabbed the folder containing my bank statements and the tampon box cash. Bye, Mom. I called out at 7:15 a.m. Have a good day, sweetie, she yelled from her bedroom. She sounded hungover but cheerful. She wouldn't be leaving for the bank until the branch opened at 9. I walked to the bus stop, waited for the neighbors to drive past, and then ducked into the alleyway. I walked 3 miles to the transit center and caught the first bus to Tempe. I sat in the back, hugging my backpack to my chest. Every time the bus slowed, I checked out the window, terrified I'd see Ray's truck. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my friend, asking where I was. I ignored it. I arrived at the law office at 8:45 a.m. The receptionist, Sharon, looked up over her glasses. She didn't ask for ID. I think the sheer panic on my face was identification enough. Mr. Henderson is expecting you, she said. Mr. Henderson was older than I expected, with a kind face and a suit that looked expensive. He gestured for me to sit. You're cutting it close, Cassie, he said, checking his watch. The bank's open in 15 minutes. If your mother presents that power of attorney, she can legally drain the trust into a custodial account, and once it's commingled with her funds, it becomes very hard to recover. We need to file the injunction now. I know, I said, unzipping my backpack. I have everything. The dates, the stolen savings, the voice recordings. Excellent. Let's see the ledger. I reached into the main pocket of my bag, my fingers brushing against my history textbook and my gym clothes. I felt around for the wire spiral of the notebook. My hand hit the bottom of the bag. I frowned and pulled the bag open wider, shoving the textbook aside. I saw the tampon box with the cash. I saw the folder with the bank statements. But the space where I had placed the notebook I had slept with under my mattress for 3 years, the notebook that contained the only proof that my mother was a thief, was empty. My blood ran cold. I looked up at Mr. Henderson, my mouth opening and closing wordlessly. Then my phone buzzed. A text message. It was from Mom. Did you really think I wouldn't check your bag while you were in the shower? We need to talk. Now. The room spun. For a second, I thought I was going to throw up right on Mr. Henderson's mahogany desk. My mother had the notebook. She had the dates, the specific amounts, the angry scribbles of a teenage girl documenting her own exploitation. She had the roadmap to my resentment. Cassie! Mr. Henderson's voice was sharp, cutting through the fog. What's wrong? I held up the phone. My hand was shaking so badly the screen was a blur. She took it. She took the notebook. She knows I'm here. Or she knows I'm somewhere I shouldn't be. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, his face grave. Does she have the bank statements? The recordings? The statements are in the folder, I said, my voice cracking as I clutched the manila envelope still in my bag. But the context, the daily logs, she has them. I stared at the text message again. We need to talk. Now. Panic clawed at my throat. If she had the notebook, she knew I had been building a case. She knew this wasn't just a teenage rebellion, it was a legal strike. She would be at the bank the second the doors unlocked. It was 8:52 a.m. She thinks she's won. I whispered. She thinks because she has the book, the evidence is gone. Then, a memory flashed in my mind. The night I started the notebook. The night I realized my phone might accidentally break. I emailed myself copies. I looked up at Mr. Henderson, my eyes widening. The cloud, I gasped. Excuse me. I took pictures, I said, tapping furiously on my screen. Every page. Every time I filled a page in that notebook, I took a photo and emailed it to a secret account. She has the paper. She doesn't have the data. Mr. Henderson's expression shifted from concern to shark-like focus. Can you access them right now? Yes. I was already logging in. There they were. Dozens of emails with subject lines like homework and history notes, all containing high-resolution attachments of my ledger. I'm forwarding them to you. Do it, he commanded, turning to his computer. I'm drafting the emergency motion. But we don't have time for a judge to sign this before 9 o'clock. We need to stop the bank directly. He picked up his office phone and dialed a number from a contact sheet. I know the branch manager at the main Wells Fargo in Mesa. If I can get him on the line, I can threaten them with liability if they process a transaction on a contested trust. I hit send. Sent. Mr. Henderson held up a hand, listening to the ring tone on the speaker. Ring. 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 Come on, Gary, he muttered. Wells Fargo, Mesa branch, this is Gary speaking. Gary, it's Alan Henderson. I'm representing Cassandra Miller regarding the Gerald Miller Trust. I am faxing over a cease and desist and a notice of contested guardianship immediately. You have a Brenda Miller likely coming in to liquidate funds. There was a pause on the line. The silence stretched for 5 agonizing seconds. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Alan, the manager said, his voice dropping to a hushed, uncomfortable tone. You're cutting it close. Is she there? Mr. Henderson asked. She's not just here, Gary said. She's at my desk. And she's not alone. Who is with her? A police officer, Gary said. She's claiming her daughter has run away and stolen cash from the home, and she needs to access the trust to hire a private investigator. Mr. Henderson's eyes narrowed into slits. He pressed the speakerphone button so I could hear. Gary, Henderson barked, his voice dropping the polite veneer entirely. Do not disperse a single dime. Put the officer on the line. Now. There was a muffled scuffle on the other end, the sound of a phone being passed hand to hand. Then, a stern, authoritative voice filled the room. This is Officer Griggs, Mesa PD. Who am I speaking to? This is Alan Henderson, attorney at law. I am currently sitting with Cassandra Miller in my office in Tempe. She is safe, she is not a runaway, and she is my client. The woman in front of you is attempting to defraud a trust under false pretenses. I held my breath. This was it, the moment where the lie either crumbled or solidified. She's there, Officer Griggs asked, sounding skeptical. The mother claims the girl took cash and fled the state this morning. She took the bus to her lawyer, Henderson corrected. And the only person who has a history of theft in this family is Brenda Miller. Officer, if that money leaves the vault, the bank and the department will be party to a felony. I am filing for an emergency injunction as we speak. I suggest you bring Mrs. Miller to the mediation center across from the municipal court. We can settle the custody of the funds there on the record. There was a long silence. I imagined Mom's face, the fake tears drying up, the panic setting in as her narrative collapsed. Fine, the officer said. We'll meet you there in 40 minutes. The line went dead. Mr. Henderson stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. Let's go. You did good, Cassie. But be ready. She's going to come at you with everything she has. The drive to the courthouse was a blur of highway overpasses and heat haze. I spent the time organizing the files on my phone. I synced the folder to Mr. Henderson's tablet. The digital paper trail was a straight line pointing directly at her guilt. We arrived at the mediation center, a nondescript beige building that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. We were ushered into a small, windowless conference room. Mr. Henderson set up his laptop, connecting it to the wall-mounted monitor. Sit here. He pointed to the chair furthest from the door. Do not speak unless I tell you to. Let the evidence do the talking. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Officer Griggs walked in first, looking annoyed that his morning had turned into a civil dispute. Then came Mom. She wasn't wearing the flowery blouse from the kitchen. She was wearing her church clothes, a modest gray dress and a cardigan, despite the heat. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked small, fragile, and utterly sympathetic. Ray wasn't with her. That was a small mercy. She stopped when she saw me. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. I saw the rage, pure, unadulterated hatred, flash in her eyes. But then, she blinked, and she was the grieving mother again. "Cassie!" she gasped, rushing forward as if to hug me. "Please take a seat, Mrs. Miller," Mr. Henderson said, stepping between us like a human shield. Mom halted, looking wounded. She sat on the opposite side of the table, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "I don't understand why lawyers are involved. We're a family. My daughter is confused. She's been under so much pressure at school." "We're not here to discuss school," Mr. Henderson said, tapping the space bar on his laptop. The screen on the wall flickered to life. "We're here to discuss the $4,280.15 you stole in 2021 and the trust you attempted to liquidate today." Mom straightened up. She reached into her oversized purse. I expected her to pull out more tissues. Instead, she pulled out a thick, leather-bound planner. She slammed it onto the table with a heavy thud that made the officer jump. "You want to talk about money?" she hissed, her voice suddenly dropping an octave, the fragile mother act evaporating instantly. "Then let's talk about the cost of raising an ungrateful child. I kept receipts too, Cassie. Itemized deductions," Mom announced, opening the leather planner with a flourish that felt rehearsed. She ran a manicured finger down a column of handwriting. Rent, prorated for her bedroom square footage, $500 a month. Utilities, $150. Food, $300. Rides to work before she got her license, $20 a trip. She looked up at Officer Griggs, her eyes wide and pleading. "I haven't been stealing from her. I've been subsidizing her. That savings account, it was barely a down payment on what she owes me for keeping a roof over her head." I sat frozen. The audacity was breathtaking. She was charging me for my childhood. She was sending an invoice for her legal obligation to keep me alive. "Mrs. Miller," Mr. Henderson said, his voice dangerously calm. "In the state of Arizona, parents are legally required to provide food, shelter, and medical care for their minor children. You cannot retroactively charge rent to a 14-year-old. That is not a defense. That is an admission of financial abuse." "I'm a single mother," she shouted, slamming the book shut. "I did what I had to do to survive. And she pointed a shaking finger at me. She sat there hoarding money while I struggled, while Ray and I tried to build a home for her." "Let's talk about that struggle," Mr. Henderson said. He tapped a key on his laptop. On the wall monitor, a spreadsheet appeared. It was my ledger digitized. September 12th, withdrawal, $4,280.15. September 14th, purchase, Best Buy 75-inch TV. September 16th, purchase, the Phoenician Resort, Scottsdale. "This doesn't look like survival, Mrs. Miller," Mr. Henderson narrated. "This looks like luxury." "You can't prove I bought those things with her money," Mom scoffed, crossing her arms. "Money is fungible." "True," Henderson agreed. "But intent isn't." He clicked another file. A video window opened. It was a recording I'd taken 6 months ago, phone propped against a stack of books while Mom paced the kitchen. "Video, Mom. You don't need savings. You have me. Why do you need to leave? So you can be better than us." "Video, Cassie. I just want to go to college, Mom." "Video, Mom. College is for people who think they're too good for their family. I spent that money so we could be happy now. You owe me that happiness." The silence in the conference room was absolute. The hum of the projector fan sounded like a jet engine. Officer Griggs shifted in his chair. He looked at Mom, then at the screen, then back at Mom. The sympathy was gone from his face. "Ma'am," he said, his voice heavy, "that sounds a lot like an admission of misappropriation." Mom's face turned a blotchy, violent red. She looked trapped. Her eyes darted around the room. The locked door, the lawyer, the cop, and finally me. She realized the poor mother act wasn't working. She realized the reimbursement lie had failed. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that was far scarier than her shouting. "You think you're so smart," she hissed at me. You think you've got it all figured out with your little notebook and your fancy lawyer. She turned to Officer Griggs. You want to know the real reason I took that money? You want to know why I monitor her accounts? She paused, a cruel smile touching her lips. Because I know where she really got it. She didn't earn $4,000 babysitting, officer. You need to check her locker at school. I didn't steal her savings. I confiscated drug money. The accusation hung in the air like toxic smoke. Drug money. It was such a desperate, chaotic lie that for a moment, nobody spoke. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw not a parent, but a drowning woman trying to pull everyone else under the water with her. Mr. Henderson didn't gasp. He didn't look shocked. He simply adjusted his glasses and turned back to his laptop. That is a felony accusation, Mrs. Miller, he said, his voice ice cold. Officer Griggs, before you radio for AK-9 unit to search a high school locker, I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit C. He clicked the mouse. The screen changed. It wasn't a spreadsheet this time. It was a gallery of scanned images. Deposit slip dated June 2018. Check from Grandma Miller for $50. Memo line, happy birthday, Smarty Pants. Direct deposit, Target Corporation. Biweekly. Taxes deducted. Venmo transaction log. Algebra tutoring, babysitting, math help. Henderson scrolled through the images, a waterfall of undeniable legitimate income. Every dollar had a name. Every cent had a source. Unless Target is a front for a cartel, Henderson said, looking over his glasses at Mom, and unless her grandmother is a kingpin, your claim is demonstrably false. And filing a false police report to cover up your own fiduciary theft? That's another charge we can add to the pile. Officer Griggs stood up. He loomed over the table, his patience entirely evaporated. Ma'am, you need to stop digging. Right now. Mom shrank back. The fight drained out of her face, replaced by a sullen, childish petulance. She knew the drug lie had backfired. She had overplayed her hand. She stammered, her voice cracking. I just wanted what was best for us. What's best, Henderson said, sliding a document across the table, is for you to sign this waiver of guardianship regarding the estate. You will relinquish all claim to the trust. You will acknowledge that the previous savings were misappropriated, and you will agree to a restraining order regarding Cassandra's finances. And if I don't, she whispered, then Officer Griggs arrests you for theft and fraud, Henderson stated simply. And we sue you for the original $4,000 plus damages. You'll lose the house, Brenda. Mom picked up the pen. Her hand shook, but not from fear, from rage. She glared at me as she signed, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it made my stomach turn. Scritch. Scratch. She shoved the paper back. Happy now. I'm not happy, I said, my voice quiet but steady. I'm just safe. She stood up, grabbing her purse. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't say she was sorry. She walked to the door, paused, and looked back at me with a chilling smirk. You got your money, Cassie, she said. But remember, it's my house. My name on the deed. Don't expect to sleep there tonight. She slammed the door. Officer Griggs sighed, running a hand over his face. I can give you a police escort to get your things, kid. Thank you, I said. I'd appreciate that. I felt a wave of relief, but it was brittle. I had won the battle, but I was effectively homeless. I had the trust fund, but I couldn't access it for 3 months. We'll figure it out, Mr. Henderson assured me, sensing my anxiety. You can stay. My phone buzzed on the table. A notification from our neighbor, Mrs. Higgins. She was the nosy type, the kind who watched the street through her blinds all day. I picked up the phone. It was a video message. Thought you should know, the text read. I pressed play. The video was shaky, zoomed in from across the street. It showed my driveway. Ray was there. He was dragging my mattress out the front door. Behind him, Mom was tossing black garbage bags onto the concrete. My clothes, my books, my life. But it was what Ray held in his other hand that made my heart stop. A red canister. Lighter fluid. He wasn't just kicking me out. He was uncapping the fluid and dousing the pile of my belongings right there in the driveway. I shoved the phone toward Officer Griggs. They're burning it. They're burning everything. Griggs didn't hesitate. He grabbed his radio, barking codes and coordinates as he sprinted for his cruiser. Get in! Mr. Henderson stayed behind to handle the legal fallout, but I needed to be there. I needed to see the end. We tore down the street, sirens wailing, cutting through the lazy afternoon traffic. When we skidded into the driveway, Ray was flicking a lighter, struggling to get a flame in the breeze. My clothes were soaked in fluid, a glistening pile of wet fabric on the concrete. Mom stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching with grim satisfaction. Drop it! Griggs roared, exiting the car with his hand on his holster. Drop the lighter! Now! Ray froze. The lighter clattered to the driveway. Mom's smug expression shattered. She ran down the steps. It's my property. It's on my land. I can burn trash if I want to. That's not trash, Brenda, I said, stepping out of the cruiser. My voice was steady, louder than the sirens. That's my life. Griggs handcuffed Ray for attempted arson and destruction of personal property. He cited Mom as an accessory. As they were led away, Ray cursing, Mom weeping and screaming that she was the victim, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a massive, heavy door finally clicking shut. I salvaged what I could. My history textbook smelled like fuel, but the photos in my cloud were safe. The money in the trust was safe. I was safe. That was 3 years ago. I live in Flagstaff now. The air here is thin and cold, sharp with the scent of pine instead of asphalt. I have a small apartment near the university. The couch is secondhand, a beige thing I bought from a graduating senior, but it's mine. I bought it with my own debit card. No one asks me to pay rent to exist. No one tells me I'm entitled for eating food I paid for. The trust fund paid for my tuition. I work part-time at a bookstore, not because I have to, but because I like the quiet. I like the smell of paper. Mom still texts sometimes, usually late at night. The messages are long, rambling paragraphs. Sometimes she says Ray left her and took the truck. Sometimes she says she's sick. It's always a mix of apologies and blame. I did everything for you. You abandoned the family. I miss you. I never reply. I deleted the block button because seeing the messages pile up, unanswered, feels like a victory in itself. It's proof that her words can't touch me anymore. I keep the notebook in my desk drawer. The spine is bent, the page is dog-eared. I don't write in it anymore. I don't need to document my life to prove it's real. But I keep it, just in case. Sometimes, when the wind howls outside and the snow piles up against the window, I take it out. I run my fingers over the word written in Sharpie on the cover. Evidence. It reminds me of the girl I used to be. The girl who stood in a kitchen and let her mother steal her future. And then it reminds me of the woman I became. The one who fought back. She told me families share. She told me actions have consequences. She was right. Her actions cost her a daughter. My actions bought me a life. And looking around my quiet, peaceful apartment, I know I got the better deal.